For today's panel, we're going to be focusing on women in leadership. And I'm joined here with some very special women. We actually got together last night to get to know each other better and had a multitude of topics. And these are three amazing women, CEOs and presidents of some companies that are very well known and recognized. I'd like to introduce to you Gail Boudreau, CEO of Anthem Incorporated. If you'll raise your hand, right here. Barbara. We've also got Barbara Humpton, CEO of Siemens USA, and of course our New Mexico. And from New Mexico, Pat Vincent-Colon, who's the CEO from P&M Resources. Please help me welcome them. Now, some people might start off this panel by saying, what challenges have you encountered because you're a woman, CEO, president of a large company? But we're not going to do that. We talked a lot last night on how would we do this? And what I want them to do is first introduce themselves, give a little bit of background about themselves and what they do in their companies. And I'll start with you.
Sure. Well, thanks, Governor, and it's absolutely a pleasure to be here. As you heard in the brief introduction, I'm the CEO of Anthem. Anthem is a diversified health services company that serves about 40 million individuals across the whole spectrum of the benefits industry, from Medicare, Medicaid, and the commercial business. I've spent my entire career in the industry, very passionate about how we can make healthcare better in this country, and that's really what drives me. On a personal note, I'm an avid sports fan, played basketball growing up. Teamwork was a huge part of my sort of philosophy, and it's something that I think is really important. And I have two sons, and my husband is right now digging dinosaurs in Montana. So we have a wonderful family, and that's sort of binds us together, and a son who's playing basketball this year at Purdue.
Good. Barbara Humpton. Fantastic, thank you. Barbara Humpton, I'm privileged to serve as the CEO of Siemens USA. And you may know Siemens as a 170-year-old company that's been dealing with the mega trends of the world from its start, and with the rise of communication, the first industrial revolution, and here we are at the brink of the fourth industrial revolution. So Siemens in the US has 50,000 employees. We're in all 50 states. We have 60 manufacturing, research, and digitalization centers across those states. And what we're working on is everything from the transformation that's happening in energy, to the needs of healthcare for the future, to the needs of infrastructure. And all of those have been a huge focus for us. Big question, what is the role of a conglomerate these days? That's what we're grappling with at Siemens. And what we've discovered is that we're able to take advantage of the expertise of people with deep technical knowledge across the corporation. But what we need in leadership is people who can connect the dots, people who can communicate, people who drive teamwork. So my start was in Lexington, Virginia, a small college town, Washington and Lee and VMI. And everyone in town was exposed to all kinds of liberal arts things. And in fact, one of the key themes was you have to really be accountable, and you have to be proactive. Because frankly, if we want to field a team, we need people in town to get onto those teams. If we want an orchestra, we need somebody to play French horn. And they didn't actually need me on the basketball team, Gail, but that was the whole spirit. And it turns out that that's what we'll talk about, I think, a little bit more, is unleashing the talent of the communities in which we live and work. Thank you.
Thank you. Pat?
Well, Governor, thank you so much. I'm Pat Vincent-Colon, and I'm privileged to be here. This is my home state, and this is my governor, so I'm just doubly delighted to be here. As the governor said, I'm chairman and CEO of P&M Resources, and we are the primary utility in the state of New Mexico. We serve about half of the customers in New Mexico, and then we serve in Texas, right around Houston. We serve the booming Permian Basin, and then north of Dallas. So we're in 2 states. We are privileged to be leading the clean energy revolution. We are, with the governor's help, transitioning out of our coal here in New Mexico, and we are moving to wind and solar and natural gas. We are blessed in this state to have an abundance of resources: wind, solar, natural gas, and oil. But I think the thing that I most like to emphasize when I talk about our business is the utility industry is 5% of the nation's GDP when you look at us and all of the jobs we create. And if you think about that, we like to say we're the first 5% of GDP. Because if you didn't have us, you wouldn't have anything else. You wouldn't have those iPads, we wouldn't have all this, and you all travel. So you know what it is like to be in a country that has reliable, affordable, safe, and increasingly clean electricity and natural gas. So we are very privileged in this country, and one of the things as we move forward, we all know we're competing with Google and Apple and all the cool places to work, but if you think about it, we enable all of that stuff. The people that come to our industry come because, like many of you, they have a sense of public service. Our utility's name is New Mexico Public Service because of that. And so we're sort of leading that transition, and we're looking forward to continuing to do so and work with our partners.
Thank you, Pat. Appreciate it. As you can see, we have very powerful, strong, accomplished women on the stage with me, but often you'll get asked or complimented, or there's a statement made of, oh, how cool, you're a woman and you're a CEO. What does that feel like? What is that question to you when it's asked of you or the statement is made? How they point out that you are a woman as though that's something unusual to then be the CEO as well.
Governor, I was very lucky. My father was in the military, and my father never graduated from high school. So he enlisted in the military in World War II, and he always treated us like we could do everything. And quite frankly, it wasn't until I got to college that I realized there were certain things I wasn't supposed to do because I was a girl. And so I just kind of never let it get in the way. And I remember one time somebody came to my office and first met me, and she goes, oh, wow, you're younger than I thought you would be, and you're actually attractive. I thought you would be old and fat. So sometimes it's more women that say things to you than men. But I really was blessed in my upbringing in terms of just not letting it be an issue. But I have to say, I do look forward to the day where we don't have any more firsts. Yeah, where you were the first Latina governor, I was the first chairman of the Edison Electric Institute. I look forward to the day where that's just all normal. Okay.
Yeah, so I would add, similarly, I started in my introduction around teams, and I grew up with a similar sort of attitude, and it really started from competitive sports. I love competitive sports, and that's really where it's about performance. And I've always viewed that it's really not about what you look like, but it's about your performance. It's about your ability and your performance. And I have a saying that I use very often with our employees across our company: there's always another move. That's another thing I think you believe, or that you learn very strongly when you learn how to compete, that you're always thinking about how do you improve your personal performance, how do you improve the performance of people around you. And what matters, and we were sharing a story last night, I had an older brother growing up and really mostly played sports with his friends. And they really didn't care that I was a girl. They cared that I could catch, I could throw, and if I couldn't, then I got subbed out. So it was really pretty clear, and so my philosophy is about, really we all need to lean in to what is our ability and performance, and I agree with you. I think it will be a great day when we're not talking about the first, but we're talking about ability, performance, focus, accountability, passion for what you do. And so as I get that question, and I do get that question quite a bit, it really is a really different dimension, because I've always thought about each of my roles around actual performance and ability. And the other thing I think that's interesting for me is our industry, in the healthcare industry, the decision makers are predominantly women. They make most of the healthcare decisions for their families. They're responsible for organizing, collecting, and bringing, the family on both sides, their children and their parents. And it's actually been a huge advantage thinking about how you connect. So while I can say, look, I don't think of it just as women. I also understand the demands that people have in our industry and what is needed to connect and make sure that we're meeting the customers and consumers we serve, and that's hugely important. And I just believe that balance in any decision, I make much better decisions, quite frankly, when I have lots of opinions, and that's what I look for.
Yeah, amen. Yeah, I agree with both of these comments. When I started at Siemens, I was a little bit worried about discrimination myself because it's an engineering company, and I'm not an engineer. So I'll tell you that what we're learning these days is that there's talent everywhere in our organizations, and what we need to do is tap into it. This idea that we're going to be surprised at what leaders look like in the future. So as I've gotten that question through the days, my response to folks has been, I know I'm different. I think this organization needs more of what I have to offer.
And as governor, when I was the first female elected district attorney 32 years ago in New Mexico, and I dealt with 98% men. Lots of law enforcement agencies, most of them were men. And I did feel, I never started out in any of my campaigns for when I ran for offices for district attorney and now for governor, I never had to say, I'm a woman, and because of that, I want you to vote for me. If it's not obvious, then I have problems I have other problems. But I wanted people to look at me and think about the ideas or the policies that I was bringing forward and that I was wanting to bring either as a district attorney or as governor. I wanted people to appreciate me for my background, education, what I brought to the table, and not because I was a woman and not because I'm Hispanic. Those things by themselves, I think, are great as a role model to say that you can have someone to look at and say, I can do that, because I've seen other women. But you're right, when are we going to stop having the firsts? I'm the first female Hispanic governor in the country, and I appreciate that because I hope other little girls will see it as that's not a barrier for me, but I tell them that's not what's going to get you there. It's going to be your education. It's going to be how people hold you accountable in your first job, no matter how small that job is, all the way to where all of you have gotten. And so what was your journey like when you started to work in your jobs, et cetera? Was there any challenge that you felt was an impediment, or was it a benefit, or was it nothing on the table at all?
Yeah, let me start. It's interesting. What I got into was literally a mission. I thought I would be a math professor like my parents, but IBM came to Wake Forest University and interviewed folks and said, we're grabbing as many math majors as we can. We want to get you engaged in some projects we're doing. IBM has an obligation, a responsibility to the nation to work on national security. And I got involved in programs that I'm going to tell you helped bring down the wall, helped end the Cold War. And having a taste of that, I was hooked on the mission. Now, my natural, I'll call it axis, is not up and down. My natural axis is side to side. What smart people can I find to help solve a problem? And as I worked through my career, I wasn't ascending because I was asking. We often hear this about women, right? I wasn't asking for that next role. I was being asked, hey, Barb, we've got a problem on the global positioning system ground control software. Will you come and help us unravel this? Barbara, we need you over here. Would you come to Siemens and help us address the needs of the US federal government? So for me, it's been about mission. And I would, what I have experienced is that if we can each follow that passion that we have that says, this is what makes me happy, this is what makes me tick, and this is something I bring to the table that is missing. I think that's what is really the magic in career development.
Yeah, I'll add too. I mean, I think mine was about learning and risk-taking, I think, more than anything else. And as I think about my career, I moved 14 times. And I basically learned every aspect of the industry I'm in. I worked in just about every functional area, I led service centers and call centers. I ran markets, and I moved a lot. And I was able to do that. My husband also had a very promising, strong career. We had young children, but we both made an agreement that we would be supportive of each other. And so I was able to do that, but I also moved for him at times when he had opportunities. But there was a core thing, and the reason I did it is because I always felt I wanted to learn something else. And I think as I reflect back on that, one of the things that I'm really passionate about is sort of rotational experiences. That going up a vertical chain doesn't really give you the broad perspective that you need. You learn skills, but you really need to get a very broad perspective, and it's great to step out of your comfort zone. It's great to do something, and that's one advice, particularly for women, and I do think there is a gender difference here that, just as you said, I was asked or I was promoted, or I even find in many of my own teams that, I'm going to the individuals on my team and talk about these new assignments and stretching versus them pushing. And I think that's really something for everybody, men, women, but anyone starting their career wherever they are. You don't have to have all the skills day one. You have to have the confidence that you can do it, and you will learn it as long as you have the mentality that you're willing to learn. I think that for me was really important, and there were many times I took assignments, and yours was mission. Mine actually wasn't quite as grand. My first job was a professional basketball player. I got on a plane, went to Europe, didn't speak the language, got there, no one spoke the language. The advantage there is you could say thanks to the referees because they didn't understand the language, so there was some advantage to that. But it really taught me that you could do a lot of things, and that again gets back to if you put yourself out there and you really, really don't know all the answers, you can solve the problems. And I think that more than anything to me is a really important lesson as you work through your career.
And mine was somewhat similar. I did consumer packaged goods and consulting before I came to the utility industry. And I came to the utility industry and I fell in love with what we do and what we stand for. And I didn't envision being CEO, and sort of like you didn't reach out. And my boss called me one day and he said, Pat, I'm putting you in charge, and I was at Xcel Energy at the time, in terms of all of the operations, transmission and distribution across our 11 states. And I said, well, I'm not an engineer. And he's like, yeah, I kind of know you're not an engineer, Pat. I'm a journalism major, and I think some days in my industry that probably caused more skepticism than my gender. And he said, but you know how to ask questions and you know how to hold people accountable. And he said, and that's what I'm looking for. And I just continued to, every year I learned something new in this industry. And I always say at the end of the year, I ask myself two questions. Did I learn anything? And did I contribute? And when the board of directors looks at what they pay me, are they getting the best return for their dollar by giving it to me? And so it's sort of that two-way street. And I think that having a passion for what you do, being able to ask questions, and really, really wanting to learn and move. And it's tough someday because I know women especially don't always like to move. And I moved, and sometimes you've got to do it. And I also think going into line management, going into operations, it's scary. When you're a journalism major and there's a sea of engineers out there, it can be scary, but those are the kind of risks that I think we need to take to get ahead. And I think when I talk to young women, I say, get out there, move, and young women today are a lot more aggressive, I think, than we were in terms of asking for assignments and asking for things.
Right.
So,
but I agree with your line experience, really managing frontline operations, really understanding the business and really understanding how do you motivate people. Because as you move up in any organization or anywhere, you really have to get things done through others. And your ability to do that is to motivate, like you said, to hold people accountable, to be fair, and to really get people to follow you. And I think followership is as important as leadership.
Absolutely.
And that's really critical.
Absolutely. And I really agree with you, Gail, because you have to be a risk taker. And it doesn't matter whether you're female or male. It just doesn't matter. I think if you take risks and you have confidence, there is no school on how to be a governor. We got elected, and you brought whatever education you had, and you hope that you would learn from others. But there's no school that says you can walk in and you have the solutions to the many problems. You learn as you go along, and you have a team. You surround yourself with great people, regardless of gender. But that is what makes you successful. I would not be successful by myself, ever, in anything I do. It has to be with a team of people that are passionate about what I do. And so you learn as you go, and it's how fast you learn, and it's how passionate you are about it, and how well you serve, at least as a public servant, how well you're serving the people, and how much connection and connectivity are you constantly having with people. So you have to be able to want to be around the people that you're serving. And I do a lot of that. We did that last night, which was a lot of fun with those little kiddos. And we were talking about that last night, is how you, in New Mexico, there's just wonderful people and you can connect with them. And so I do a lot of that. But I see little girls, and we talked about this last night, about role models. Do you see yourself as a role model? Do you see yourself as a role model because you're a woman, or a role model because you're successful? A role model because you are the CEO of a very large company? Or do you see it as they'll just see me as successful and it doesn't matter whether I'm a woman or not?
I always think of Charles Barkley when he said he wasn't a role model or didn't want to be a role model, and I think, like it or not, we're role models. And I don't think about it in that term, but I think we're role models because we're female. I think we're role models because we're CEOs and we're successful. And I think I think people don't want to be a role model because they think it's a burden, but it's really a privilege. And to inspire kids, and every once in a while somebody comes up to me and says, "I've watched your career and it's great." And or my daughter would like to talk to you because they want to do this, or sometimes my son would like to talk to you. So I think when I sort of turn the role model around to think about it as a privilege, I do enjoy it. And like I said, we are role models whether we like it or not. And it's good we're role models in a positive way as opposed to a negative way.
Yeah, I'll build on that because I think people are aware of this, that when you serve as the chief executive of an organization, the culture is you. You define the culture. And so what I'm hoping is that the culture that I'm building in our colleagues at Siemens is one of optimism, one of energy and enthusiasm, one of this idea that we're stronger when we're reaching across these very, very different disciplines. That's what I'm trying to do. And it's fantastic, actually, to get validation of that. My favorite thing to hear is when we finish a meeting and the team says, "Man, I'm energized. Let's go get it." So, yeah, it's fun.
I agree. I mean, Governor, and what my panelists have said, I agree on all fronts. And I actually relish that role. I think it's a responsibility. I actually think when you step into leadership, you need to be a mentor. You need to set the culture. It is about you. There's no one else to be looking at across all of that. And I think that's really important for organizations. I recently had Billie Jean King come speak to our leadership group, our top 250 leaders. And the reason I did that, she has a book called Pressure is a Privilege. And I just so fundamentally believe how blessed we are and how privileged we are to have pressure. We shouldn't think about it in the other way, but it is a responsibility. And I take that responsibility personally, and I look forward to all those opportunities across my team, across young people. I have, young sons. I just think it's really important that we set the right example for those who work for us, for those in our communities. And to me, that's actually the best part of the job. It really is. It's just an energizing moment for me, and it's really, getting the right culture. It just delivers such superb performance and things that really matter to people. So to me, I really lean into it. I love that.
As a governor, I think it is an extreme responsibility. You travel throughout the state, throughout the country, and I do my own grocery shopping. I go into the stores by myself. Well, not by myself. I do have detail. There are times that I go to sections in stores and say, "You need to go over there," because I have to shop in this section by myself. And so, but I'll see little girls. I'll be, in an aisle in the grocery store, and they will pass by, and many of the kids, they know me by Susanna. I prefer to be, that's my name. And so I'll see them peeking as I'm looking at the cereals I'm gonna get, and they're looking, and is that Susanna? And you hear them whisper, and I can hear them, and then I'll look at them and I say, come here. And they're little, and they're big-eyed, and we hug, we take selfies, my ice cream is melting, but it's okay. And that connectivity with those little girls, for me, is the biggest privilege. And so when I have kids come in from pre-K on up, we sit in the cabinet room and we have long conversations. I like to ask them questions because I don't want them to see themselves with any limitations. Early on, in third grade, what do you want to do? Where do you want to be? So that they can see that the sky's the limit. You may never get there, but you're never going to stop trying to get there. And so it's a responsibility that I think I have to take very, very seriously, as you all do, because if we do it wrong, that too is a reflection, and it's not a positive one, that may keep young girls from dreaming to be one of us.
Well, so isn't this interesting? In the last couple of years, we've gone from talking about, where are the jobs going to be, to now talking about where are the workers of the future going to be. I mean, this is part of the discussion we've been having is, listen, if we're only tapping into half of the population to lead business going forward, we're missing a huge opportunity. So I'll just give you the Siemens example. We have become one of the top 10 software companies in the world in these last few years. Sure, we are very knowledgeable in the physical world. We make things. We make really big things. We make tiny things. We make really big things that are important. In fact, I think it's kind of cool that we're all suppliers and customers of each other on this stage.
We have your stuff in our power plants.
And I use your healthcare.
Right.
But when we look at that physical world, we've been actually now adding to it the virtual world. And the big question is, where are we going to find the people who can fulfill those digital jobs of the future? Right? And so, 1,500 open jobs today and competing with everybody for that talent. So we want the best and the brightest to get interested in our line of work. And so part of what we're doing, I believe, is setting the stage for even the very young people to have interest in changing the world the way we are in business.
And just to add on that, because I think we all shared a little bit of this, it does start, though, with the ability to read, write, and communicate. And digital skills are critical, the emerging economy, the gig economy, et cetera, but we still fundamentally across the board really need people who can work with other people, who can communicate, who can think about things beyond sort of just what's in front of them. And I think that sort of human skill is something we just can't lose as our children grow up and as they interact with others and quite frankly become our workforce of the future. That's hugely important, and they have to continue to have those skills as we grow our technical skills.
And one of the things we talked about last night is, I'll brag on the utility industry a little bit. We have a large proportion of female CEOs, and for those of us in the West, the movement started in the West. That's where the first female CEOs came from. And I think a lot of it is because of those skills of working with others, because when you're in a regulated utility, you have to work with all of your stakeholders, your policymakers, same with you in healthcare. And so a lot of those skills about being able to communicate, to persuade, to connect the dots, and to work with others are critical. And I think that's a different skill set than we've looked at before, whether it was engineering or finance. But it's those things that again, this is a generalization, but women tend to be somewhat better at those skill sets.
Well, often you'll get asked the question, how do you handle it all? Family, children, all the things that, there's this thought that we take care of the house, we do the cleaning, you take care of the children, you take them to camp, you go to school, you drop them off, you pay the bills, everything at home. And how do you do that and balance that with your job? As though that is unusual. And so how, as a woman, do you do that? And is that a fair question?
I think for us, sitting up on this stage, we are all so privileged. And we have the ability to have people help us with those tasks. And I think that the people that I really admire for their ability to balance are the single parents, right, who don't necessarily have the funds. I watched one morning in my lobby when one of my employees came in and her son is disabled, and she's had to sit and wait with him until the bus for his school came around. I thought, wow, how does she do that? And so, you know, is balancing tough? Do we work all the time? Yeah, but we are blessed in terms of our ability to have folks help us take care of those kind of things. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a question that comes up a lot.
Yeah.
It comes up a lot when I talk to our employees too. And, you know, my answer is, you know, it's not a question that I can answer for anyone else, right? I think it's an intensely personal decision and set of answers. And I think there are resources, certainly, and you are right, we have absolutely lots of resources, but a lot of it is there are choices you have to make, things you have to give up. You know, when I talked about moving that many times, it wasn't easy. It really was hard. We made choices, you know, as a family, you know, together, and I think it's part of being really clear about what those choices are and what's really important and how you balance that. And that isn't the case for everyone, like to your point on that, but I do think it is an intensely personal issue. And we try, certainly as an employer, have flexibility in our work time. We have many individuals who do work at home. We have people who, you know, we try to balance because we're a national company. So, you know, as an employer, we think it's a responsibility to enable that kind of flexibility and also understand that this next generation of workers has a very different viewpoint on what's important to them and how they balance things. So my sort of value system on balance is probably not the same as, you know, my entry-level employee who's 24 years old. So we try to have sort of a flexible, you know, system of things, but it does get down to accountability, performance, and still managing your responsibilities. And I think at the end of the day, it's got to be part of that. And so that's how I like to think about that. But it does come up quite a bit.
Yeah, and I made choices at a very young age, and I don't know what drove me to make these decisions. I was 14 and decided I was not going to have children. I knew I would be married to my job. I knew I was going to be a lawyer. I knew I wanted to get into prosecution, and I knew that I would be living my job. And so at 14, I just decided I would not have that in my life. But I do have a disabled sister that, when my mother passed away, came to live with me. So I always knew my sister, who I view as my child, was going to come back to me. But because I was married to my job, people say, well, how come you don't have any kids? Well, because I don't, and I don't want to, and I chose not to. But yet I was helping many children in my job as a prosecutor who specialized in sexual abuse and physical abuse of children and the prosecution of those cases. So I'll say I don't have any children, yet I have many. Right. And so, and I do all those other things, but it almost makes it sound like it's our job to pay the bills, to do this, to that. And therefore, how do you get to your CEO level? As a state employee and as a DA, I didn't have the help that I have now. So I was at a much lower pay, still am. Governors don't get rich. And so with that, we still have to do all the normal things that we do. And I don't think about it as this is my job because I'm a woman. And it just becomes, I don't know, you just triple task, right. Move forward, and don't think of it as...
In my family, it's my husband who does all of those kinds of things. I'll share a personal story. When I was in middle school, when they asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? I said, a grandmother. And I've kept that as my goal. And in fact, I am a grandmother. I have 2 grandsons, adorable.
Leapfrog mother.
If I could have, I would have, but unfortunately that was a necessary step.
High achievement.
But with that idea that, you know, this was my ultimate goal, and everything else is gravy. It's been a blast.
Anything you'd like to add as we wrap up?
This has been fun.
It's been fun. I mean, I think really, based on the questions and the type of things we're talking about, there is this sort of set a dream and follow it. I mean, I really believe that. I think, and no matter where you are in your career or aspirations, really lean in. Think about where do you want to be next, and don't be afraid to make the leap. I mean, the issue of risk-taking is really important for all of us as a country, as companies, and it's really important you take balanced risks. You don't do, quit your job before you have a job kind of thing, but you really, I think, lean in and don't have every skill checked off, because that's how you learn, and don't be afraid of learning. And I guess that's the advice that I think is really important to the individuals that I talk to on a regular basis and try to really encourage. And, I think I got that from coaches that I played for. It was really, you had to learn new things. You had to take a risk. It didn't always work. And I really encourage people to do that.
Yeah, my piece of advice is, hey, don't worry, there's time. 70 is the new 50, right? The arc of a career is no longer 25 to 30 years. Mm-hmm. There is time to get the kind of experiences Gail's been talking about and to reach out the way Pat has.
And Governor, I just want to thank you for being such a great role model for our state. And one of the things that I love about the governor is she is about accountability. And you know that we are unfortunately a poor state. But the governor always says, just because kids are poor doesn't mean they can't learn. Just because we're a poor state doesn't mean we can't achieve. And there are times in my own workplace that I have to look at you and saying, okay, we're going to hold people accountable. And I think that is really important, that role model that you have set for our state. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And at the end of the day, I had three wonderful women in my life. Two teachers that said, where are you going to be? I was in the 9th grade. Where are you going to be in 5 years? And I said, all I want is a date for the prom and a pretty dress. I'm not thinking 5 years down the road. And those two teachers made me think. They made me say, where do I want to be, and start thinking about things and start planning so that you have a path of where you're going to go. And of course, my mother, who taught me to be patient and taught me to, it didn't matter the color of my skin, it didn't matter my gender, that we can be whatever we want to be if you're passionate about it, and if you actually start to set goals and follow those goals. And so I think I just happen to be a woman, and I just happen to be Hispanic. I hope that what I have to offer is because I have solutions and I bring good policies forward and a good team to put that together and serve the state. So for each of you, thank you, Gail, Barbara, Pat, for serving on this panel. I appreciate it, and keep being the great role models that you are.
Thank you.
We really appreciate you.